When it comes to travel, one of the key reasons I travel is to experience the cuisines of different places. And sometimes I discover dishes that I absolutely must have once I've returned to whatever my home base is. So here is one of my favorite dishes, the best way ever to prepare pork belly, Dongpo pork. Let's go to the kitchen. Oh, I can't go to the kitchen. It's barred on the other side. Here is our pork belly, rind on. Look at that, beautiful marbles of fat. Reminds me of Hong Kong and all the wonderful pork belly we had there, prepared in many different ways. So the very first thing we're actually going to do is blanch this. And blanching means that we're going to immerse it in boiling water and cook it for no longer than 10 minutes. It's not about cooking it all the way through. It's about blanching the outside of the pork. And I have a feeling that this probably comes from a time when meat was not refrigerated and you really wanted to do this to prevent it from making you very ill and or killing you. So into our boiling water we go. Just going to cover this back up to bring it back to a boil. Of course, every time you put something cold, which that pork is, I probably should have brought it to room temperature first. Either way, every time you put something cold or cooler into boiling water, it of course drops the temperature, so you have to bring it back up before it will start boiling again. So while we parboil, while we blanch this beautiful pork belly, we're going to go prepare our ingredients. Let's go to. So let's take a tour of our ingredients. This is actually a relatively low ingredient dish, which makes it nice for convenience of preparation. Ginger root, of course, very, very traditional in Chinese cuisine, Asian cuisine, and used to be very traditional in European cuisine as well, actually. Spring onions will actually be not used as a garnish here, but cooked into the broth. We have coconut sugar, unrefined. Light soy sauce and dark soy sauce. Yes, there is a difference, so having both is the better option. Now, the recipe that I have calls for oil for cooking, but we're going to use the very traditional cooking fat that predates industrial oils, and that is lard, pork lard, from happy pasture-raised pork. Well, pasture-raised pig, I guess it's not pork until you kill it. Anyway, and then traditional would be cooking wine, or not cooking wine, rice wine, excuse me, but unfortunately, I don't have very much rice wine left, and I don't really feel like wasting the time going to the store, which is far away because we live in a country where nothing is in walking distance. So we're going to substitute that with just a traditional grape white wine. I don't think it will actually make that much of a difference in the final product. So those are our ingredients. Let's get down to ingredient preparation. Well, let's get to it. First, make sure you wash your spring onions. They tend to be dirty. We're then going to chop them into smallish pieces, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch in size. This is going straight into the broth. It will basically be cooked down into nothing. Then we chop our ginger into 1/8 inch slices. This is later going to caramelize and become tasty little bits that we can either use as a garnish or eat separately. Then we add our liquids all together in a measuring cup, our wine, our 2 soy sauces, light and dark, our coconut sugar, yes, that will caramelize quite nicely. Okay, well that's all of our ingredients. So now let's check on our pork. Pork is ready to remove from its blanching bath. So use the tongs to lift it out. Try not to burn yourself. I'm just going to let this drain on this towel. And we're going to let this drain, and then we're going to pat it dry, because we definitely do not want any of this water being present when we plop this in a thick bath of lard that's boiling hot, because that will cause splatter that will probably cause second, or even if you're really lucky, Well, no, definitely not 3rd-degree burns, but if you're lucky, 2nd-degree burns. So we're going to avoid that by making sure this is completely dry before we add it into our pot. But first, let me show you our pot. So traditional clay pot is actually what we're going to be using. This is a Korean one, but they're very similar to the Chinese ones. And yes, you can put these babies straight on open flame. Now, I don't think this would work at all really on a glass top stove. It just wouldn't. There's only would be one point of contact, and that would not be very efficient, but it's great with fire. So let's dry our pork and get down to it. As with many traditional dishes, Dongpo pork comes with its own amusing apocryphal tale. The dish supposedly gets its name from famous Chinese poet Su Dongpo, who had been banished to Hangzhou after doing what many poets before and since have foolhardily done, criticizing the emperor. According to one tale, Su had a pot of pork belly bubbling away over the fire when a friend visited him and engaged him in a game of chess. Losing track of time, the pork was overcooked almost to the point of starting to burn, with the juices having cooked down and caramelized. Supposedly, years later, Su would reward his industrious workers with cubes of this braised pork belly threaded on a string for easy eating, I suppose. Meat snack necklace, anyone? Anyway, the dish thus apparently reached the masses and obtained its traditional square serving style. So just how true is this origin story? Well, how true is any bit of history, really? Okay, there she is. She's all nice and dry. Time for the frying to make a nice crispy skin. The heat is very hot. I can definitely smell it. It smells like lard in my kitchen. So I'm just going to give this one more pat, because generally as it sits there, more liquid tends to emerge from the inner recesses of the tissue, and we do not want that hitting that hot oil and creating an instant boiling oil situation. So also, another pro tip, I have my splatter screen ready to go so that the second this is in the oil, this is covering everything to hopefully prevent me from gaining more burn marks on my hands, arms, and face. Here we go. See, it's already splattering. We're basically going to let that go until both sides are well browned. We basically want to create a nice crispy rind and create the nice browning Maynard effect on the muscle tissue sides so that we caramelize all those sugars that naturally occur in pork. So cook it on one side, then just sort of use your tongs to lift it up, see if it's brown, and then flip it. Okay, well, it usually takes about 5 minutes, so see you in a little bit. And now for a word from our sponsor, me. If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so that you'll know instantly when I roll out the latest and greatest in content. Okay, well, back to your regularly scheduled Contessa. Time for flipping. This is going to embarrass me because this piece is really big, but you're going to see just what I mean by golden brown. So we'll work to achieve that same color on the other side. Should be about another 5 minutes. So we are ready to remove our now browned on both sides pork belly. I'm just going to put it in here to drain. You see, look at that beautiful browning there. Excellent. All that flavor. Okay, now I'm actually going to add all of the remaining ingredients not into this pan. Into my clay pan, and I'm actually going to save all that oil there, and I'm going to use that again later on for cooking or making something delicious like biscuits. Right. Okay, so we turn on our clay pot. We add our various flavor-giving vegetables, green onion and ginger specifically, our mixture of light soy sauce, dark soy sauce, rice wine, white wine, and sugar. And actually we do need water as well, so I'm going to use the water in this cup to get the rest of that sugar that has mostly dissolved. I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to add our meat back in. And believe it or not, this pork belly will fit in there. Now, if your pork belly does not fit in whatever vessel you're using that somehow replicates a clay pot, then you can cut it in parts. I would let it settle first before you cut it, because we don't want all those juices to drain out because they haven't settled back in yet, but you can do that. It's not exactly kosher, but it will work. Okay, so as you see, clay pot works on the stove just like any other regular metal pan or pot would. Okay, well, let's see, it should take maybe 10 minutes for this to come up to a boil. Clay does take a little bit longer to heat up than metal, but once it's hot, it stays hot forever. It takes a long time to cool down, which is great. So our broth is bubbling away merrily, and we're going to go ahead and add our pork belly into it. I'm not happy with that, so I'm actually going to do what I said is not kosher, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to go ahead and cut this baby in half. To the cutting board. Thankfully, this has been sitting that whole time, so the juices should have redistributed, which will minimize juice loss, but there will still be some. I'm confident of that. I'm thinking about this strategically because I want it to fit in. Cutting it in half will probably actually not allow it to fit in, but cutting into chunks like this should do so. Okay. I'm going to put the big piece in first, rind down, and then I'm just gonna slip this baby in there. And I'm not gonna use my fingers to make it fit. I'm going to use my tongs to get it to nestle quite nicely. Right, so then we're going to actually turn the heat down so that it just stays at a nice simmer, and we're going to cover it, and we're going to let it cook for 2.5 to 3 hours until it's tender. Now, in that time, I do like to I like to turn the meat so that the rind has a chance to be completely submerged, and then the non-rind side has a chance to be completely submerged. So I usually flip that about halfway through. Okay, well, let's see what happens. We are at the flipping point. So you'll see it's actually much more tender than it was before, and it's also shrunk in size. Quite a lot of volume has been lost. That's fine, but I'm going to go ahead and do the flipping now. So we'll flip this little piece. I want this to be, oh, that is looking pretty tender, but I want the meat too. That's looking pretty tender too. Well, okay, fine. I'm still going to flip it and let it cook on the other side for a little while. My husband says I have Teflon fingers. You may not want to try touching things like this with your own bare fingers. I'm just going to kind of manipulate it down back in the spot. And oh, look at that. So yummy. Okay. Going to let it cook down now. And in fact, what you really want to do is you want to cook this down until this becomes this thick, syrupy black sauce. And what will delightfully happen is these chunks of ginger will candy and caramelize and absorb a lot of that yummy pork fat from this very healthy pasture-raised pork belly that I have here. And this becomes something that is absolutely delightful to eat, even though I've never read anywhere that people in China actually do eat these lovely chunks of leftover ginger, but I do. Okay, it looks like probably another hour or two, I think. Time to check the tenderness of our pork belly. So this is looking really good. See how my tongs just pretty much press into it? Yeah, this is done. But the sauce has not cooked down yet. So we're going to pull the pork belly out, hopefully without losing too much of it to broth. And then we're going to cook the sauce down. There we go. Minimal burning of my flesh. Oh, there's a couple of chunks. Just pull those out. So then I'm just going to turn the heat up on my clay pot, and I'm just going to let this boil down into a lovely, thick, syrupy sauce. And we're back. Look how beautiful and thick this is. This is what we're looking for. So once I removed the pork, it actually didn't take that long to reduce down. So we have this delicious sauce that will now be served on top of this when we slice it up. So I suppose we shall do that right now. Time to slice up our Dongpo pork. So you want to slice against the grain so that it doesn't fall apart. Yeah. So we're just going to slice it into nice thin strips. Et voila, or whatever that is in Mandarin, or Cantonese actually. Dongpo pork plated up on a bed of rice with stir-fried bok choy, and the pork has been sliced and topped with the sauce that created as it cooked and that I reduced down at the very end. Absolutely delicious. Well, sorry, but you're not here, and I would like to eat this now. I hope you've enjoyed your Dongpo pork tutorial. Have you ever made Dongpo pork or some dish similar to it? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, cook creatively and stay tuned for your moment of kitty zen.